friends. Welcome to this week's M-Kids Bible Adventure.
Hello, kids, and welcome to another M-Kids Bible Adventure. My name is Uncle Jacob, and I'm with Natty. Hello, Natty.
Hey, Jacob, how are you?
I'm fine.
And how are you, kids?
It's good to see you today.
Good to see you too.
Okay. Are you ready for another Bible adventure?
Can't wait.
Okay. So today's story is about a woman called Abigail.
I've never heard that one.
Okay. Wow. Then you'll be very interested to see what she does. All right. So Abigail is a married woman to a man called Nabal. And she eventually becomes David's wife. Oh dear. And she eventually becomes David's wife.
Oh.
But let's see what happens. So Abigail could hear the party going on. Her husband, Nabal, was... Wow, I missed that full stop. So Abigail could hear the party going on. Her husband, Nabal, was drunk again and boasting about the number of sheep and goats he owned. He was a rich man, but a foolish one who never gave glory to God for anything. Abigail shook her head and went back to her chores. One of her husband's shepherds ran towards her. "Mistress! Mistress! We're in terrible trouble." "What happened?" "David, he sent 10 men asking for supplies for his warriors, and Nabal yelled at them. He said unkind things about David and his men. They were kind to us when we were out in the wilderness with our flocks of sheep. Not one animal was lost while they were with us, and now Nabal shows no thankfulness. We're all afraid David will come to get back at Nabal."
Sounds like Nabal is very ungrateful.
He was, because David's men protected Nabal's sheep and goats. What would happen in those days is that a shepherd with the sheep would be attacked by either animals or bandits. And shepherds were not trained warriors, so it was hard to keep the bandits from taking sheep or animals from killing the sheep and the goats. But because David's men were trained warriors, they could drive away any bandits and kill any animals that wanted to kill the sheep and the goats.
So they were just there for extra reassurance?
Yes. So this is what happened next. So Abigail knew that men of war often let their anger get out of control, and David had been at war with his enemies for years. Not only that, but the prophet Samuel said that God wanted David to be the next king. That made King Saul very jealous, and now David had to try to stay safe so that Saul could not kill him. As usual, her husband Nabal had spoken without thinking. It was up to her to save her husband and the shepherds. So Abigail thought quickly and called all her servants together. "Hurry! Pack every loaf of bread you can find. Pack wine, meat and grain, raisins and fig cakes, and load the supplies in 2 carts. I will ride out ahead of you and try to stop David from fighting us." "But he will kill you, mistress." "My life is in God's hands," Abigail said. Wasn't she brave?
I think she was brave and she had her faith in God.
Yes, she did. The Bible has a lot of brave people, especially women.
Especially women, yes.
Okay. So David was known for being a man who loved God. It is God's job to correct people for doing what is wrong. But if Abigail was unable to stop him, David might hurt her husband by trying to correct Nabal himself. She had to get David's attention long enough to talk him out of doing something he would feel bad about later. So David and 400 of his warriors rode towards her. She prayed as she rode her donkey down the middle of the road, blocking David and his army. Wasn't that brave of Abigail?
I think it was brave of her.
Imagine.
I would never do that.
Yes, for real. Imagine today if there were tankers and big trucks, army trucks coming down the road and you drove your motorcycle right in the middle of the road in front of them in the opposite direction. Isn't that crazy?
I think that would be crazy.
Who would win, the tankers or you in the motorcycle?
Well, it would depend.
Nice answer. It would depend indeed. Anyway, this is what happened to Abigail on her quote-unquote motorcycle, which was really a donkey, by the way.
Nice motorcycle.
So David and 400 of his warriors rode towards her. She prayed as she rode her donkey down the middle of the road, blocking David and his army. She knew that in their anger, they could ride right over her. David stopped and glared at her. There was no smile on his face. So kids, give me your best glare. A glare is an angry face that you make towards someone to let them know that you're angry. I'm Abigail, the wife of Nabal. Please forgive me. She spoke quickly and from her heart. She took blame for not knowing that David had sent 10 of his men for food and other things they needed. As the carts rumbled up behind her, she offered David and his men the supplies Nabal had refused to give them. The Lord has picked you to be our next king. Please do not sin against the Lord our God by trying to get even with Nabal, for he is a foolish man. David listened to Abigail. Slowly, a smile began to spread across his face. I thank God that you came here. If you had not been brave enough to come, I would have murdered your husband and every man in your camp. He accepted the supplies and rode away. So Abigail returned home, glad that David was no longer angry. Nabal was still drunk, so she waited until the next day when he was sober to tell him all that had happened. Then Nabal became so upset that he had a stroke. A few days later, he died. So Natty, why do you think Nabal was upset?
I think it was probably because if it wasn't for his wife, it was obvious that David would go after him and kill him, or do something a bit more rash.
True. I also think Nabal was upset because his wife had given away things without his permission, and he was a proud man.
That is true, very proud.
So Abigail explained the whole story, and the only thing he got from it was the part where she gives away a lot of the stuff that he had to stop David's anger. He forgets the part where she says he was on his way to kill us.
It's true, but shame was such a terrible way to die.
Yes, he had a stroke and then he died. A stroke? I can't explain a stroke. It's too complicated.
Okay, I don't think you have to explain a stroke for them.
Yeah, let's keep going. When David heard, he knew Abigail was now a widow who needed help. Evil men might steal all her husband's property, so he sent some more of his men with a message for Abigail. He said he wanted to marry her. Abigail said yes. She could not have been happier because she knew God was giving her a godly husband. One day he would be king. And that's the end of that Bible story. Do you have any questions, Natty?
I wouldn't say I have many questions, but doesn't noble mean foolish tongue?
But I'm not sure which came first, the name or the meaning. But we'll get to that. Alright, so here's some interesting facts about the story. Or rather, an interesting fact, because I'm only giving one. So here's an interesting fact about this Bible story. So when Abigail married David, she was one of 3 wives. By the time David died, he had at least 8 wives. Can you believe it?
So, David was a polygamist.
Yes. A polygamist, kids, is someone who has several wives or husbands. But that was not God's best plan. From the beginning, God said that a marriage is between two people, one man and one woman. And Jesus said that a husband and wife should stay together as long as they live. So when you get married, kids, you marry one man or one woman. So, sometimes we have to make up for the bad things other people do. God watches over us and helps us be brave when we try to make things right. Have you ever had to correct? Have you ever had to take the blame or to correct something bad that somebody else did?
I think I did, yes, not too long ago. And
Okay.
you?
I have as well. Sometimes at work, people forget to do things and I have to get them done so that the work doesn't suffer. Of course, I tell them later what I've done so that they don't do it again, or so that they remember to do their work. Alright kids, we've come to the end of today's M-Kids Bible Adventures. Did you guys have fun?
I know I did.
Okay. If you liked the story you've just heard, you can come to the Miracle Life Bookshop and buy yourself a book or two to read to yourself or to read to your children. And of course, from me and Natty, join us again next week for another M-Kids Bible Adventure.
I can't wait. See you next time.
See you next time.